All right, it's week 5, Sportsnet's NFL Fantasy Playbook Live. Jesse Rubinoff, Donnovan Bennett. Where in the world is Andy McNamara? Nobody knows. I don't know. We'll play the Carmen San Diego game. Where is he? Where's Andy, DJ? You got to tell me.
Well, as you see, I'm sporting my Camp Paradise crew neck because on City TV, shout out to our friends at City, we have Bachelor in Paradise Canada. And
Nice.
so I'm sorry to break the news before it airs tonight at 8, again on City, 8 Eastern. But Andy is vying for true love. He is in the Bachelor house. He's taking his fantasy knowledge to another level. He's hoping to get to the fantasy suite. So, Andy, go get yourself a rose, my friend.
There are people that bet on Bachelor and Bachelor. Like it's not that crazy. Like maybe somewhere Andy's like running a book right now of like he knows the contestants beforehand. He's getting all his research prep because that guy always comes prepared. So Andy, wherever you are, if you're going for the roast tonight, we miss you, buddy. He could be at the dog pound in Cleveland as well. That let's just face it, he could be somewhere.
I hope he's at Urban's Chop House.
Yeah.
Didn't fly back with us on the plane. He just posted up at the bar. But you stumble on a great thing. I think we got the Sunday morning, obviously, stream. Maybe we go Sunday evenings leading into the batch, talk about some prop bets. How many times are we going to hear for the right reasons? I might have to do that stream alone because I think I'm the only person who cares that much. But what I really care about is fantasy football. And we have an incredible slate of games. Everybody in the AFC, it seems, is 3-1 other than the Chiefs.
Mhm.
So it's a couple big games to see who contenders and pretenders are. And I don't know about you, but I feel like there was more injury news this week than I can remember in a long time. I learned about a mallet fracture. I didn't know what that was, but we should pour a sip out maybe for some Russell Wilson owners who are going to be sitting tight. I don't know if they handcuffed Wilson with Geno Smith because I forgot he was in the league. But yeah, lots of intrigue this week in fantasy.
The Russ injury. I mean, how many times did they have to show the finger? It's like, we get it, guys. Like, we get it. The finger's messed up. You don't have to keep showing it. Like, it was tough to watch. So Russ had surgery, expected to be out anywhere between 4 to 6. Some were even speculating 8, but it looks like, Russ is probably going to try and beat the timeline as quick as possible and get back in about a month. Okay, let's run through a couple game time decisions here, which I think are important. DJ, you mentioned the injury news. Now, there are 2 specific running backs that I want to address right off the hop here who are expected to play, but I want to discuss what it means for their fantasy outlook this week. That being Joe Mixon and Dalvin Cook. Both of them are battling ankle injuries. Both of them didn't really practice at all this week, but apparently both of them are going to play. Now, I want to attack this from 2 different angles. Number one, if you're a coach with a franchise running back in Dalvin Cook or Joe Mixon, and you know that these guys have nagging ankle injuries, why would you let them play when they haven't practiced, when there's the risk, of course, of re-injuring and re-aggravating that ankle injury, and therefore it being a longer-term injury? Just sit them for a week. You have capable backups and bring them back when they're healthy, no?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the case of Minnesota, they do have a capable backup, but they're in a situation where Mike Zimmer, they got to win. They're in a division that is unlikely they're going to win, so they're going to have to fight for a wild card spot. So I think they're already looking around in the NFC and saying, where are we? I think the Bengals, are the opposite, where they don't necessarily have a capable backup in my mind's eye now that Bernard has moved on, but they're playing with house money in the sense that they're 3-1. They've got good vibes in the building for the first time, and so you want to keep that rolling. It's funny in terms of injuries and practice. I would say out of all the positions, running back is the position that needs to practice the least. Outside of training camp and getting some timing in terms of the handoff exchange and how long you got to wait and have patience for your offensive line to open holes. I actually think, especially now we're post the first month of the season, give the running back some time off their feet, just rest them, whether or not they'd be able to play with, in this case, an ankle injury. Just rest the rest of the body and keep them fresh. And we count carries with backs in terms of how many carries do they have in their career, and at what age are they going to fall off. We started to do that with Edgerrin James. Now we do it with everyone. We don't count the carries in practice, and so giving those guys a week off, I think, makes sense. The other thing is an ankle injury, unless it's high ankle, which is almost closer to a broken bone than a sprain. An ankle injury is pretty easy to play with. You tape it up, you spat it up, and it's more about pain tolerance than effectiveness. So I'm actually pretty confident if you got both of those guys and they're up and they're going to play, you might as well play them because I think they'll be pretty effective. Unless, a freak thing happens and someone in a pile is, pulling on that ankle, which might happen. But I think running back is the one position where specifically if guys haven't practiced, I don't think it impacts how they're going to play that much.
Another thing to talk about in this Bengals-Packers game, it looks like T. Higgins will be back in the lineup, and that leads us to our first question on YouTube. Alex asks, to pick two, T. Higgins, Devonte Smith, Michael Pittman Jr., Antonio Brown, full PPR. Four really good options there, DJ. T. Higgins, Devonte Smith, Michael Pittman Jr., and Antonio Brown. Higgins coming back from a shoulder issue. A lot of weapons there in Cincinnati, but who are you taking of those four options?
Whew, that is a good one.
Pick two. I mean, that is a good one, and those are four really good options. I would say in that scenario, you're pretty much you can take two of any of them, basically, is what I'm looking at. T. Higgins, I think, is an upside wide receiver 3 in this spot because it's obvious that Joe Burrow has established chemistry with Jamar Chase and Tyler Boyd. Are there going to be enough reps to go around for T. Higgins to really knock it out of the park this week? Michael Pittman Jr. is a little bit hit or miss lately just because of the Carson Wentz double ankle sprains. You don't really know how healthy Carson Wentz is and how that impacts Michael Pittman Jr. Devonte Smith is the receiver to own in Philadelphia. So if I'm looking at that, I think today I would go probably T. Higgins and Devonte Smith of those four, just because of the uncertainty of Carson Wentz. I like Higgins coming back in the spot. I think there's going to be high shootout potential in that Bengals-Packers game, and Devonte Smith, Jalen Hurts is looking his way all the time. So I would go Higgins and Devonte Smith there.
Yeah, I like Devonte Smith for sure. I mean, you do like Pittman, but I don't really trust Wentz. I actually would take a long look at Antonio Brown. Gronk again down, going up against the Dolphins, which is a pretty good secondary, but I expect Tampa Bay to come out throwing. And when we talk about number one options, especially with Gronk being down, I know Evans was there first. I know Godwin is the guy in the slot, but more and more, last week aside, AB, as he's gotten comfortable with that offense, has become, virtually a number one, even though, he was just added to that offense basically as a dessert, as a sweetener, and not the main course. But he's starting to grow. So I would actually take a long look at AB because I think that the game against the Dolphins is going to be pretty high scoring.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing about the Dolphins is that do they have the ability to keep up with the Buccaneers in this game? And if the Bucs start to run away a little bit, do they start pounding the ball more, hand the ball off to Leonard Fournette, run the clock a little bit? Because Jacoby Brissett, although I wouldn't say he's played poorly, his offensive line has played poorly in front of him, but he's having issues stretching the field. We know that Devonte Parker now, this is relatively breaking in the last 20 minutes or so. Devonte Parker, who is expected to play, is out today for the Dolphins. So that's going to elevate any of the running backs you have there. Jalen Waddle will be elevated as well. And Mike Gesicki, too, who a lot of people are sleeping on. That leads me to the next question. David on YouTube asked CJ Uzama, who had a ridiculous game against the Jaguars, but that, remember, was with T. Higgins out of the lineup, Cameron Brate or Mike Gesicki. Full PPR league. This one for me, especially given the Devonte Parker news, is a no-brainer. I'm going Mike Gesicki all day long because Brissett is just going to be looking his way, especially if they're chasing from behind. They don't have a threat with Will Fuller and Devonte out of the lineup to move the ball down the field. They're going to be going shallow all day long. I like Gesicki and Waddle for the Dolphins.
I love Gesicki as well. Yeah. And we had a question last week about tight ends to pick up. Gesicki's actually not owned in a lot of leagues. And so if you are someone who's got Logan Thomas now down on IR, if you're one of the Gronk owners, if you're one of the Kittle owners who spent early, probably a late first, early second round pick on Kittle, and he's down, go and get Gesicki if you haven't. One more thing on AB and talking about that game.
Yeah.
It's in Miami, where he's from. And his first game with the Pats, you remember, in Miami.
Remember that.
He went big. He went for 2 touchdowns. So, I loved kind of sentimental why guys will be fired up picks. And so that's another reason why I like AB. But yeah, tight end at this time of year from this stretch on, when you have guys down, when you have buys coming up, it's basically just tread water and get through and hope that you're okay, unless you have one of the top 2 or 3 guys. And we thought one of those guys was going to be Kyle Pitts, and he's yet to get in the end zone. So tight end is a minefield this year.
Pitts scored this morning. It's London. It's 9 a.m. It's Falcons Jets. Like you're waking up for at 9 a.m. to watch the Falcons and Jets. Like, I don't know. You could watch us instead. Why would you watch the Falcons? Yeah, why would you watch the Falcons and Jets when you can watch me and Donovan chop it up about fantasy? Look, I'll tell you, I was watching the game. Zach Wilson, not looking very good. Okay, it's not looking good for Zach Wilson and the Jets. So why don't you just join us instead for the next 45 minutes or so, and we'll chop up all the fantasy that you could ever want. Okay, moving on. Koala Bear Caleb on YouTube, who has been a regular for this segment, which is nice. Koala Bear Caleb, what's up? Flex this week. Do you go Cole Beasley or Hunter Renfro? Now, Renfro has made a little bit of a resurgence here, maybe started slow beginning of the year, but third down Renfro is what they're calling it in Vegas. Anytime David Carr gets in a little bit of a pinch, or Derek Carr, he's throwing to Hunter Renfro. And I like Renfro in this spot just because I feel like there has become dependence when it comes to Carr on Renfro. Now, I understand you could probably make the same argument about Cole Beasley, but you do have the Emmanuel Sanders factor in Buffalo, and he is really carving out a role for himself in Buffalo. And obviously, yeah, you have Stephon Diggs as well. So I like Hunter Renfro in that spot for the flex.
See, I like Hunter as the better player, both in baseball and in football. But I actually like Beasley in this spot because I hate the Chiefs' defense, specifically their secondary. And so if it's just a week-to-week spot in a flex position, I like Beasley today. And I do think that Bills-Chiefs game will be pretty high scoring as well. That's a really good Sunday nighter tonight. So I'm gonna take Beasley only because the Bears' defense is not what they once were, but they're still better than the Chiefs' defense by far. And so that's why I'm going to go with Beasley.
Yeah, what is going on with the Kansas City Chiefs defense? And is it possible for Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and company to just outscore their opponent every single week? Because that seems like that's what's going to have to happen if the Chiefs want to get back to previous glory, because the defense can't stop anybody at the moment.
Yeah, and their defense was never elite, but they were timely. They would take long drives and make you settle for field goals. The Honey Badger, Tron Matthew, and Sorensen at the safeties would run around, make plays, turn the ball over, and things would start to snowball if you gave that offense a short field. Jones and Frank Clark would get after the passer, get some big sacks, put you in some second and third and long situations. And that's just not happening. They're playing Chris Jones outside for some reason as a defensive end, and they're not getting any interior pass rush. Frank Clark has been in and out of the lineup due to injury. Taron Matthew started the year out of the lineup. And quite frankly, I don't think Sorensen is that good. He's just, good enough to start for them and run around and make plays because he's got Matthew behind him protecting him. And so this is a team and a franchise that has really invested all of the resources financially and via the draft on offense. They could have addressed the defense. They went and they got Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a running back to make that offense even better. They struggled in the Super Bowl, and their takeaway was, we got to shore up that offensive line. We're going to trade our pick capital for Brown Jr. and shore up the left tackle and draft a couple of draft picks over the last 2 years on the other side, on the right side of that offensive line. They didn't address the fact that that defense got torched in the Super Bowl as well. And Tyrann Mathieu looked like he wanted to fight guys on the sidelines. So I could see them a year from now going Carolina Panthers and investing their entire draft to the defense. That's what they need to do. But for right now, that doesn't help you. So you don't want to own their defense in fantasy, surely. You want to take the over whenever the line comes up because of that offense and that defense. And yeah, you want to take skill position players, certainly receivers, against them because they haven't been able to stop a nosebleed this far.
Yeah, fantasy owners aren't going to complain. Those who have Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, they're not going to complain about the offense having to score a ton of points. But if you're a Chiefs fan, that's obviously a different story. Jason on Facebook asks, will the Chiefs cover the point spread against Buffalo? They are -3 against the Bills in what should be, I think you called it, just a high-scoring affair. Josh Allen, who started slow. I know he was probably right around the third favorite in the league to win the MVP this year, and started slow. People kind of jumped off the bandwagon. He had one bad game basically, and he's back. The Bills are back. The offense is back. Their defense is capable as well. Better defense than the Chiefs. I know the game's in Kansas City, but we just talked about all the issues surrounding the Kansas City defense. I think the Bills at this current juncture right now are a more complete team, and I would roll with the Bills tonight. That's where I'm going to put my money. How about you?
Yeah, don't let the two matchups, the AFC Championship game and the regular season matchup a year ago, where Kansas City won both of them, fool you. The team playing better football right now is the Bills. And quite frankly, it's not close. And it's not just about the records. Outside of week one, the Bills are killing people. And I know it's early, but it's still the NFL. And they're putting up Division One versus Division One AA type scores in the NFL. So the fact that you're going to get the Bills as a dog coming in hot, coming in, quite frankly, resting their skill position players
Yeah.
in fourth quarters for the last 2 weekends, I would I be surprised if the Chiefs won a football game against anybody by more than 3 points? Of course not.
That's an
But
important hedge. That's an
yeah,
important hedge.
right. But
Yeah.
is the Buffalo Bills franchise right now ascending and playing good football and a great look as an underdog? Yeah, for sure. So I personally would stay away. But no, if you're a part of Bills Mafia, if you want to lay down some money, feel confident because your team is playing lights out.
These Sunday nighters are just ridiculous. Like we're so blessed as football fans to be able to watch week after week, wrap the night up with some incredible football. Okay, let's get to another major storyline of this week. Jimmy Garoppolo is out.
Yes.
And we have Trey Lance making his quarterback debut or starting debut for the San Francisco 49ers. Dude went over 20 fantasy points in 2 quarters of action. And he's finally had a week of practice now to organize the playbook and utilize his skills and make it so that it's Trey Lance's offense heading into today's game against the Arizona Cardinals. What should fantasy football fans be expecting from Trey Lance? And where do we slot him when it comes to quarterbacks? Is he in the top 12? So if you are in a league with one quarterback, would you roll with Trey Lance over someone else lower than 12 on the power rankings?
Yeah, I think he's right on the cusp. And listen, everyone who reached, whether it was, dropping a player that they could use or spending a lot of fab on Justin Fields, and listen, I love Justin Fields. If I was getting a quarterback who was basically, put in a position that is a rookie moving forward this week, I would prefer it would be Trey. I'll call him Ice Trey. Maybe he could have a Trey Young like ascension. And I think it will be akin to what we saw with the Niners a couple years ago, where they're humming, their offense is okay, it's just good enough with Alex Smith. All of a sudden, you take him out, you put Colin Kaepernick in, you put up, and the souped-up model of the same thing. And you're like, man, this feels like stealing. And I do think it's going to be the same. I mean, we saw it, and it's going to be different when you have a week to actually prepare for him as a starter. But I actually think the impact from a fantasy perspective is if Deebo Samuel was already, arguably the best receiver in fantasy, I think his stock goes up. Kittle's out of the lineup, so that doesn't factor there. But I actually fear for, and it was a mess to begin with, I fear for the Niners running backs.
Oh, yeah. Well, stay away to begin with. That's the reality.
Whether it's Trey Sermon or Eli Mitchell, you've got another now goal to go red zone threat in your quarterback now. Plus, especially in PPR leagues, all of those checkdowns that you were getting with Garoppolo.
Yeah.
In times of conflict, Trey Lance might just tuck it and run himself. So I do like the Niners offense as a whole, but in terms of fantasy, really the only people on that offense, even with Lance starting, is Deebo Samuel, who you wanted anyways, and Lance himself. I actually think, is there a receiver on that roster? Maybe if you were an Ayuk supporter, you're hoping that this revitalizes him. But aside from that, I think Lance is a really intriguing guy. Maybe not starting him right away, but getting him on your roster, keeping him, on the bench and seeing if he could push a starter. Like, is he better than, a Mahomes or an Allen or a Stafford? No. But when you get down to the, Daniel Jones, Joe Burrow category, I don't see why not, because he's giving you so much in the run game.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of wait and see when it comes to this 49ers offense now. I think Lance, if you have a better option, then kudos to you for having a better option. But if you have the ability to start a quarterback that has that kind of rushing upside, I know we expected it from Justin Fields, didn't happen, but I think we saw in the second half that the 49ers are willing to at least allow him that freedom to run when he wants to run, and that's going to translate to a lot of fantasy points. I think you made a great point with the 49ers running back situation. Eli Mitchell is expected to be back, but Trey Sermon already wasn't getting any passing down action. You don't know how the addition of Eli Mitchell back in the lineup is going to affect it. I would stay away and just wait and see. Same with Ayuk. Incredibly disappointing to start the year for fantasy owners, but maybe this is the revitalization that Brandon Ayuk needed. Anytime you change the quarterback, things are going to change in the offense. Someone who wasn't doing well before likely is going to do better, and someone who was doing well with the previous quarterback, had good chemistry, oftentimes will take a bit of a back seat. So you're going to have to wait and see with the 49ers as we go into today.
Rubes, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I got a question for you, and I got a question for everybody on the feed, and chime in. So it's week 5. 5 rookie QBs in the first round. Now all of them will have started. If you could pick one, who would it be?
If I could pick one?
If you could pick one from today moving forward for this season, who would it be? Because I'm here to tell you that if you say Trey Lance, you're not crazy. I think you already told us who you're not picking, and that's
Zach Wilson.
But I could see a scenario where, at the end of the year, from this week moving forward, Trey Lance has the most points.
Okay, so let me clarify the question here, because you're such a good interviewer. I don't want you to paint me into a corner here, okay? So any running back or any rookie quarterback, but it has to be the current situation for fantasy purposes, right? For fantasy moving forward for the rest of the year.
For fantasy from today moving forward for the rest of the year.
Okay, so for me, and I know that Justin Fields has been bad. I understand how bad he has been. This comes down to 2 players. This is between Justin Fields and Trey Lance for me. And the reason I say that is because of the rushing upside. And we haven't seen it from Justin Fields, but last week, Matt Nagy relinquished his offensive play calling duties. And that changed things up just a little bit for Fields. He wasn't running as much as we maybe had hoped, but he was throwing the ball a little bit more down the field. And we were starting to see some of the tools that made him such a coveted quarterback prospect. But depending on how long Jimmy Garoppolo is out, that's a major factor that goes into this. But if Trey Lance steals the show today, and all signs point to him having a really good fantasy day, all signs point to it, because you're playing against a Cardinals team that their offense is clicking too, so he's going to have to score to stay in this game. I think I'm with you. I think Trey Lance is is the one you want to have here, barring the Jimmy Garoppolo situation, because that's an important caveat. Don't know how long Jimmy Garoppolo is going to be out for. We got to get Trevor Lawrence out of that Jaguar situation. I know he's going to be there for probably the next decade, but we got to get him out of there because it's not helping his fantasy situation. Urban Meyer, the whole thing's a joke. So I can't with sound mind say Trevor Lawrence at this current point. I'm going Trey Lance.
Yeah, I'm interested to see what the people watching say, but it's crazy. Neither of us picked the number 1 overall pick, and neither of us picked the 2 guys that people were raving about coming out of training camp, Mac Jones and Zach Wilson. That's just how fast things can turn in the world of fantasy.
It's an amazing question because there's the fantasy side of it and then there's the actual NFL playing side of it. And from what I've seen from all 5 guys, if you're talking about how they're playing as NFL quarterbacks, you got to make a case that Mac Jones has been the best quarterback of those 5. Because you look at last week's game, he was great. He was not the reason the Patriots lost the game to the Buccaneers. He held his own against Tom Brady. Yes, he had an interception, but it was tipped, and he's done a lot of good things for the New England Patriots. Looking like a little bit of a young Tom Brady back there. I know, pump the brakes. I get it. Totally, I understand. But Mac Jones, from a pure football perspective, I think has looked the best. Not fantasy-wise, just football. Okay, moving on. Great question, by the way. 37 Will Dog on YouTube is asking, Tony Pollard or Javonte Williams, standard league? This one is interesting because Tony Pollard was making a lot of noise a couple weeks ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. It was looking like a bit of a timeshare in Dallas. And then next thing you know, Zeke, boom, explodes and does what everybody was expecting him to do from the hop in this season. Looks like Zeke is separating himself just a little bit there from Tony Pollard. So who are you going with, Tony Pollard and Javonte Williams?
I'm gonna go Tony Pollard. If it was PPR, I would lean harder to Pollard. I think this is a little closer because it's a standard league. Tony Pollard's gonna give you potentially some value in the return game. He might break 1 or 2 throughout the year. But when you look at yards per carry in that Dallas offense, Tony Pollard is actually ahead of Zeke. And when you look at yards per expectancy, Tony Pollard is actually giving you the most out of any running back in football. And so I do think moving forward, it's going to continue to be a bit of a balance. I think Zeke's running hard because he knows that he's running from someone over his shoulder that is
that's a good point.
carries. I think Williams has been, a bit disappointing given the amount of hype that was around him in drafts. But that hype is because we expected him to take that job and be the lead back, and it's still a timeshare with Melvin Gordon looking pretty good, even though he's a little bit banged up. But I would say Pollard would be my spot. What do you say?
Yeah, I agree. Just because I don't like what I'm seeing from this Broncos-Steelers game in terms of points output. I don't know where the points are going to come from. The Steelers' defense is good, but their offense stinks. So I feel like this one's just going to be a pound it, but don't get a lot of yardage, low scoring, grind it out affair. If I had to choose, honestly, fantasy implications from this game, like I'd be looking at the Denver defense because Ben's been a disaster throwing picks and fumbling the ball, and he's hurt every week, and he's a shell of his former self. So I like the Broncos defense for sure. But in this case, I'm with you. I think Tony Pollard, they're clearly making an effort to get Tony Pollard involved in the offense. And he has shown over the last 2 seasons that he is going to be incredibly efficient when you hand him the ball. And whether that translates into 20 plus fantasy points like we saw a couple weeks ago or 10, it's kind of hard because it's a little bit touchdown dependent, but you know that you're going to get him involved in the game, and that's what you want from a running back. Javonte Williams, sort of the same deal, but like I said, the Steelers defense is good. They know how to stop the run, and Melvin Gordon is kind of a thorn in Javonte Williams' side. I like Tony Pollard there. I'm going to roll with Pollard as well in one of my leagues.
I love your thoughts there. Can we go to Spencer's question on YouTube? Because I actually think it's pretty fascinating. Spencer on YouTube wants to know how much fab is too much fab for Geno, and that Geno would be Geno Smith. I think it's a really interesting question. I think there's a couple factors. How much fab do you have, Spencer?
Yeah.
Right. That's a big part of it, right? How much have you spent thus far, how big is your league? How many other quarterbacks are left? Are you in a 20-team league? Are you in an 8-team league, a 12-team league? But assuming you're playing standard 10 to 12 team league, and assuming that you're looking for Geno because Russell Wilson, I suspect, is your quarterback, and that's why there's a need. I would go around like 10-ish. Once you get into the 20s or the 30s, you're giving up, over, 20%, over 50%, 1/5 of your fab. I think that's too much because it's too long of a year. Listen, if you are, at one win or 2 wins and you have to make something happen, sure, invest some fab. But I just think in standard leagues, again, if you're in a 12-team league, that's still leaving you, barring some people carry 2 starters, that's still leaving you 10, 12, 15 other starters to choose from.
Yeah.
So it's not like running back where you're sometimes searching the waiver wire and there is nobody that you can find that's going to get some carries because of injury situation. This person could get exposure to a lot. There's going to be other quarterbacks, so it's a matter of how much do you want to invest. Given we've gotten some young quarterbacks getting some opportunity, some quarterbacks, continually being injured. If you really like Geno Smith and he's getting his first real look since 2015, then sure, spend around 10 because starting quarterback is important. But any more than that, I think is foolish because there's going to be quarterbacks that you can get for free that aren't going to be appreciably better or worse than Geno is.
Yeah, I think you're bang on there. If it's a one quarterback league, a standard league, I don't see a reason or a scenario why you would need to spend anything on Geno Smith. There's probably many quarterbacks out there on your waiver wire that probably possess more upside than Geno Smith. But if it's a 2 QB league or a super flex league, then it depends how desperate you are. If this is a replacement for Russell Wilson and there are 0 quarterbacks on the waiver wire and you don't have a third, then you're going to have to spend a lot of money. You're going to have to spend as much as you possibly can to get a quarterback to suit up in that 2 QB or super flex league. But assuming you have a third quarterback that maybe you don't want to roll out there and you'd prefer to have Geno Smith, go for 20, 25 plus. It's a 2 QB or super flex league. Quarterbacks are the straw that stirs the drink in fantasy with those settings. So I would make a bold move for Geno Smith if you, in fact, are desperate for a quarterback. I think you have no choice but to do that in 2 QB and super flex leagues because that's the reality of the situation. Bill on Twitter asks, Pittman or Waddle, half PPR. Michael Pittman or Waddle. I think the most frustrating thing for Pittman, we addressed this earlier, it's just been Carson Wentz's health. And Carson Wentz he's been able to sling it in years past. He was almost an MVP one year. He's in the conversation. And this year he just hasn't been healthy. And we have yet to see that Carson Wentz of past years. On the flip side, Jalen Waddle, he's going to get, he had that one game, 15 targets for 56 yards. You know that he is going to get targeted today, especially with Devonte Parker out of the lineup. I personally like Waddle because I think he's just going to eat. There's nowhere else to throw the ball, whether it's him or Gesicki. They're going to have to eat today.
Yeah, I like Waddle as well. He's starting to grow in that offense, and you mentioned the other receivers that were down earlier. So I like Waddle. The other guy actually, what no one asked, but sneakily I really love today. It's his teammate or former teammate, I should say, in Ruggs. When you look at the fact that no defense has given up more yards through the air to receivers than Tampa Bay. It seems antithetical because they're a really good team and they're a good defense, but their secondary has not been good, so much so that Richard Sherman led them in secondary snaps, and he just got on the team. He just literally walked off the team off the field. So that's a product of the fact that they stopped the run, so you have to pass. You're behind all the time, so they have to pass. And their secondary is pretty banged up, so you want to pass. So I love. You mentioned Smith today. I think Alabama lost yesterday, but in fantasy they're going to be winning with Smith, Ruggs, and Waddle all having big days today.
Okay, breaking news. Dalvin Cook officially inactive
Oh,
for
wow.
week 5. So there was speculation that Dalvin Cook was going to be in the lineup today. I came out hot off the top saying I don't understand why these franchises just roll out injured running backs with the potential for them to get injured long term. So it looks like Dalvin Cook will not be playing today against the Lions. That means Alexander Mattison is going to become a bell cow. He knocked it out of the park a couple weeks back when Dalvin was out of the lineup, over 100 yards. And you got to plug and play Alexander Mattison as if he's an RB1 in this situation. He steps right into the Dalvin Cook role. And I think if the Vikings can get up early in this game, you're going to be seeing a ton of Alexander Mattison for the Vikings today. So that's breaking news again. Dalvin Cook officially inactive for week 5. I'm going to have to go adjust my lineups after because I temporarily had Dalvin Cook in there just waiting to see what the situation was going to be. I wasn't going to be happy if I had to start him because I had an inkling that he was going to maybe re-aggravate that and eventually have to sit out. But Dalvin Cook officially inactive. Your thoughts on Alexander Mattison today?
Yeah, and one of the reasons I thought that you play Cook is because as Mike Zimmer and his staff are pretty desperate. You're at 1-3
Yeah.
in the NFC North, and so I actually, when you look at the spread, and the last I saw it earlier in the week, it was at 7.5 for the Vikings. I'm actually going the other way if Dalvin Cook is not playing. More than a touchdown in that game, and don't let the records fool you. If you were someone in Survivor who, for as long as possible, was going to stream against the Lions and stream against the Jets. Yes, the Lions come in at 0-4, but if for some reason you thought, I'm going to sneak by and get my Vikings pick over with early because they're playing the Lions, I would actually, change that Survivor pick while you can, because I don't love that pick with Cook not in the lineup, because yes, the Lions are 0-4, but as I said, the Vikings are 1-3. Like, they're not great either. So let's not let the history and bias of us imagining the Vikings as a playoff team or a playoff pushing team over the last couple of years, because that's not where they are right now, and they're certainly not in that space without Cook in the lineup.
Okay, so I love that you said that. I got to pump Tim and friends. We had our picks this week. We each choose two. Me and Tim. Tim's 6-2 on the year. I am 3-1, and I took the Lions today, and the line at the time was +10, and now
Oh,
Dalvin
wow.
Cook's not playing, and I'm feeling a little bit better about taking the Lions in that spot. And I think you again hit the nail on the head. Like, what have the Vikings proven to us this year? If there is a franchise in the league that is going to lose a heartbreaker to the Detroit Lions, tell me that franchise isn't going to be the Minnesota Vikings. How many heartbreaking losses over the course of the years have we seen from the Minnesota Vikings? And you're telling me that you can't envision a scenario where something happens where the Lions kick a field goal at the end to beat the Vikings. This game is not out of the question for the Lions. Do I expect them to win? No, I do not. The Vikings offense is really good. The Lions offensive line is banged up. Their defense isn't that good. They're not that good of a football team at all. But the Vikings have their own issues, and that's why I'm with you. I went +10 with the Lions on that one because the Vikings have a long history of screwing their fan base, and I could just see it. It's one of those things where you just see the Lions kicking a field goal to win the game later today.
The only word of caution I have for Lions fans is 4 of their offensive linemen are banged up, including their
Yes.
first round pick and tackle Penei Sewell. So take the under in this game is basically what I'm saying, because there may not be a lot of points scored.
Okay, so that leads us to our next question, which it relates to the Lions and Vikings. Trent on Facebook is asking, it's a half PPR league. Deandre Swift, questionable but expected to play. That's correct. Or Damian Williams, who's going to be stepping in for David Montgomery for the next month plus, at least. This is a good question because Deandre Swift, I think, in this spot, although they haven't been giving him, I think, the touches that Lions fans and Deandre Swift fantasy owners really crave, I think if they're going to be playing from behind in this game, you get the ball in his hands. He's incredibly explosive. So I think there's a lot of upside for him. I'll wait and hear what you have to say before making a call because I got to think a little bit about this one. Damian Williams or Deandre Swift?
Yeah, listen, a lot of people are running to add Damian Williams and spending a lot of fab to add Damian Williams, and for good reason, as he's been productive when he's on the field, and now he's going to get much more carries and much more snaps. But Deandre Swift has been, one of the better, more consistent backs in fantasy this year, despite what's been going on around him. And I just can't imagine you in standard league start 2 running backs and potentially, often put a running back in the flex. So if you're in a 10-team league, you need to tell me there's 20 running backs this week that you'd want over Damian Williams, or if you're talking about flex 30 running backs, sorry, not over Deandre Swift. So I don't know who else is on your team, but I think Deandre Swift is a much start. And then I start to look at Damian Williams in the flex up against who your better receivers are. But I think, Deandre Swift at this point, someone you lock and leave. If he's up and he's playing, he's starting for you week in and week out.
Yeah, I think you got to try and find a way to get both these guys in the lineup if you can, Trent. Deandre, like I said, is explosive, like DJ just told you. This guy has been putting up consistent production, even though he hasn't been seeing the ball as much as fantasy owners would like. And then Damian Williams, he is going to be what David Montgomery was. We have seen, especially when Montgomery went out last week, there are a lot of things that Damian Williams possesses that are very good qualities for an NFL running back. He's pretty good inside the tackles. He's good pass catching out of the backfield. So I know Khalil Herbert is there, and he might steal some snaps on third downs and stuff. But Damian Williams, I believe, is a pretty high floor from a fantasy perspective. I would do everything you can to try and get Deandre Swift and Damian Williams in your lineups. Okay, Vade134 on YouTube. RB2 and flex, James Robinson, Antonio Gibson, Chase Edmonds, and Kareem Hunt. There are injury implications there. Let me pull that up because I believe there are a couple injuries when it comes to Edmonds' shoulder expected to play, Antonio Gibson's shin expected to play, although it did seem like Antonio Gibson was maybe lacking a little bit of the explosiveness of weeks past. So who are you going with? Robinson, Gibson, Edmonds, Hunt, pick 2.
That's tough. I would go Edmonds and Gibson, to be honest. I mean, I think they're in this scenario because they're a bit banged up. Schefter, tweeted earlier that Edmonds was expected to play, and now that's the news we're hearing from the team. And so I would take Gibson and I would take Edmonds. Robinson has been up and down. Now, granted, Urban Meyer finally got over his love for all things Ohio State and stopped not only giving Carlos Hyde carries, he stopped dressing him altogether a week ago. So Robinson's impact went a bit up, but yeah, I think Hunt is going up against a pretty good Chargers defense. Although now that I say that, I'm talking myself out of it because the Chargers were not very good against the run, specifically against the Cowboys. That's tough. I'm going to say Edmonds, and I'm going to say Gibson. You drafted them early for a reason. They are, for the most part, 2 to 3 down guys. I'm going to go with them. What about you?
Yeah, I first of all respect Evade for having these 4 options because these are 4 premium options. You're going to be leaving 2 quality NFL players and quality fantasy options on the bench in today's action. Okay, so when it comes to James Robinson, very sketchy snap counts and touches early in the year. Carlos Hyde was stealing touches from James Robinson. That's not happening anymore. Carlos Hyde was a healthy scratch last week against the Cincinnati Bengals. And because of that, I think Robinson is dominating this backfield. I think Robinson now becomes as close to a must start as it gets just because of the dominance in the backfield. You know that if they get near the goal line, it's going to be him. He is going to be the scorer for the Jaguars out of the backfield. So give me Robinson in this case. And then the second one I think is a little bit trickier just because of the injuries. I know Edmonds is playing later in the day, so that might impact it a little bit. But all 3 have a pretty safe floor when it comes to Edmonds, Hunt, and Gibson. I like Gibson in this spot just because of the explosiveness that he has catching out of the backfield. And I don't – Hunt always, to me, always surprises me with his output because for the last couple of years, we've been sort of groomed into thinking that Nick Chubb is the guy. And every time when I watch the game or look at the box score, Kareem Hunt always just finds a way to pop up and have a pretty big game. But with that being said, I think Gibson's still the guy in Washington, and because of the fact that he is the guy in that backfield, I would go James Robinson, Antonio Gibson in those two spots. But again, kudos to Vade. And the reason we're choosing different guys here is because if you look at any rankings of running backs, those four are exceedingly close. So it depends on preference and whether you're going for high floor or high ceiling when you're making a decision like that, because that is actually a tough one. Okay, Giuseppe on YouTube is asking, flex for a half PPR. Jacoby Myers, Cole Beasley, or Miles Sanders. I cannot tell you how frustrated I have been to have Miles Sanders on my fantasy rosters. I cannot tell you how frustrating it has been. He does not get the ball. He doesn't get the ball. They don't run with him. When he runs, he's not seeing blocks. He's not cutting back appropriately. Kenneth Gainwell is coming into the game, stealing touches. Jalen Hurts is the guy that makes everything happen in that offense. The backfield is not what it was expected to be in Philadelphia. I'm incredibly disappointed with Miles Sanders. However, there's a big however in this one, because it is a flex. I'm not sure that Jacoby Myers is going to be seeing the volume either in this spot. I'm leaning here. This is insane. It's a little bit insane, but I'm leaning Cole Beasley, although I could be talked out of it just because of Sanders and what we thought he was going to be. But I am currently being polluted by what I am seeing from him, and that is he's not getting the ball. And you can't score in fantasy when you don't get the ball, Donovan.
You're not going to be talked out by me. I'm going Cole Beasley as well. And Cole Beasley may not get a vaccine shot, but he's going to get the football. And he's going to get a lot, especially when you're telling me this is a PPR situation. Listen, you got to think of game script, and you have to think of opponent. And when you are the Buffalo Bills and you're facing the Chiefs, and quite frankly, you're facing Patrick Mahomes, what do you want to do? You want to possess the ball. You want long, methodical drives. You want to let that clock tick. And you want to keep that offense off the field. So you're going to see a lot of ball possession. You're going to see a lot of option routes to Cole Beasley across the middle. The goal, not normally what it is in Buffalo, where Josh Allen is reading, high to low and looking to score explosively. The mindset changes. You're reading low to high. You're just trying to stack up first down after first down after first down and not worry about scoring touchdowns, because you give the ball right back and you might get a touchdown coming back the other way. So I think for those reasons, I like Cole Beasley. Can we go to Jeff Snipes' question on Twitch? First of all, shout out to everybody watching on Twitch. But I love this, not only because it's coming from Twitch. What is the funniest prop bet either of you put money on? I'm sure you have a great answer. If all of our viewers on all platforms have a good answer, let us know in the chat. But what is the funniest prop bet either of you, so me and you, have put money on?
I'd have to think about that, but I will say I have a text group. There's 4 of us, and we have one guy in the group who is the prop king. Okay. So he's the one who every week we ride with his props, because look, the reality of the situation is when you're focusing on fantasy, you're focusing on spreads, you got other jobs. I got Tim and Friends. You got a million things going on. I can't focus on the props every Sunday. I can't do it. So we got the one guy in the group who does the props. In terms of funniest, I mean, I'm going to have to give that one some thought, just because there have been so many over the years that how do you choose one? So why don't you start us off and let me think about it for 30 seconds.
I don't got a good football one other than the Super Bowl ones, right? Like, how long is the anthem going to be? What color is the Gatorade?
That's too easy.
And the Gatorade one, I'm not even sure how that's still a thing, because there's just so many ways to figure that out, find that out, and make a lot of money, I suppose. But I'll give you one that's not in football. often when you go to a sporting event with a bunch of buddies, you want like a team ride, give everyone something to cheer for. And so, we had one, and again, in this group, there is a guy who runs the props. We had one on who the distributor of the home run jacket was going to be for the Blue Jays. So yeah, it's a lot comes to mind. Well, it obviously can't be the person who hits the home run, right? Because you can't put your own jacket on. So who was that going to be? Obviously, tough to predict. I actually went with Manoah, and I was incorrect because he obviously wasn't going to hit a home run in the American League. But maybe that's the. I mean, I think it's funny. You guys can let us know in the chat. But that's the funniest kind of off the board bet that we did.
I like that one. The home run jacket was a thing. And a lot of people didn't like it when the Jays were struggling, but then they came back hot in September, and the home run jacket, people picked up on it again. Okay, I'll tweet out my funniest prop when I think of it. It's too hard to think about it on the spot. Okay, Caesar on YouTube. PPR League. Kenny Golladay, T. Higgins, or Alexander Madison now that Cook is out? It's Madison. Next question for me. I don't even see a scenario where Kenny Golladay factors in. T. Higgins, you could potentially make a case, but as of right now, he's wide receiver 3 in Cincinnati, and he's coming off an injury. Madison with no Cook factoring in, it's a no-brainer for me. I'm rolling Madison.
I got Madison as well. You're taking the running back that is starting and playing most downs all the time, PPR or not.
Okay, Lucas on YouTube. Do I run Chuba Hubbard in the early window or wait for the Chase Edmonds decision at the risk he might not play, although it is looking like he is going to play? I believe Christian McCaffrey has officially been ruled inactive for today's game, which means Chuba Hubbard will be getting the primary touches out of the Panthers' backfield. However, a lot of people were expecting Chuba to sort of get into that Christian McCaffrey role and soak up all of the running back touches. That wasn't necessarily the case last week for the Panthers. I'm still rolling with Chuba Hubbard in the early window instead of waiting for Chase Edmonds. There is still a bit of a risk that he might not play and a bit of a re-injury risk. You do have James Conner there, who has been hot, vulturing a lot of the touchdowns. So I'm going Chuba Hubbard in the early window for Lucas. What about you? Feel free to disagree.
Yeah, I would disagree, especially, I mean, it sounds like we're talking about, that second running back spot and not maybe a flex spot where, for whatever reason, if Edmonds didn't go and you didn't start Chuba, you could find another receiver either later on Sunday, on Monday, or also in the 4 o'clock window. So, I would say I would go Edmonds. I mean, listen, if you have Chuba, this is going to be literally your last week to play him. So it looks like McCaffrey is trending
literally
to be back. So yeah, so you might want to get that one last one in. But I think it looks all signs point to Edmonds playing. So I would play Edmonds.
And yet another fab situation where a running back gets hurt. Everybody thinks, oh, I got to empty the fab on Chuba Hubbard because McCaffrey is going to be hurt for a long time. Next thing you know, you empty 40%, 50% of your fab, and Christian McCaffrey is going to be back in 3 weeks' time. So got to pump the brakes sometimes on the fab. If you have depth, oftentimes you can withstand injuries. Chuba Hubbard doesn't look like he's going to have the impact that many people thought he would have when Christian McCaffrey went down. Ariel on YouTube, Dallas Goedert or Mike Gesicki, PPR league. Because it's a PPR league and not a half PPR league and not a standard league, I'm going Gesicki all day. Again, for the reasons we discussed earlier when it came to Waddle and Gesicki. Jacoby Brissett loves to throw underneath. Devonte Parker is out of the lineup. No Will Fuller today. Gesicki for me over Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, I mean, I know people love Goddard, but Ertz is still, somewhat of a factor in that tight end passing game for the Eagles. I think, Gesicki becomes the true second option on this offense this week through the passing game after Waddle. So I think he's the easy play.
Okay, we're getting close to the end here. So when it comes to bets, I know I mentioned that I had taken the Lions plus 10. I also have the Patriots minus 8.5 against the Texans. Now, I'm starting to sweat that one just a little bit more because I think it's going to be points are going to be tough to come by in that game. I think the Patriots are going to be focused on running the ball, moving the clock, which is never good when you have a team by more than a touchdown. But good luck to me on that bet. Is there anything that stuck out to you when it comes to spreads today? I know there's some close ones. We discussed the Bills and the Chiefs. Packers Bengals, another one that's kind of close at -3. Is there anything that sort of piques your interest as we get into the final moments here before kickoff?
Yeah, you got the Saints going to Washington as 1.5 favorites. Yes, they're on the road. Both teams are 2-2, but Washington's defense has not been good, and that
Very
was supposed to
disappointing.
be the
Yeah,
strength of their team. The Saints' defense has been pretty good, and so listen, a lot of people have lost a lot of money betting on famous Jameis Winston, but I do think that line being that close, I like the Saints, who I think is the much better football team in all three phases.
the Saints are a completely different team than we've seen in years past, and obviously I get it. Drew Brees isn't the quarterback anymore, and Jameis is the quarterback. But what we were told coming into the year was Jameis got that LASIK eye surgery, he could see again, and he was going to be throwing the ball because that's what Jameis Winston did. And in years past, and Marquez Callaway, we saw them hook up a couple times in the preseason, and everyone's going nuts about that connection. But Sean Payton's not letting Jameis Winston throw the ball. That's just the reality of the situation. He's not letting him throw the ball. He's got less than 25 attempts per game last 4 weeks. He's not letting him throw the ball, which is really interesting because how does that affect the rest of the offense? Alvin Kamara now becomes the focal point of that offense. He always was. But if the Saints aren't stretching the field like they have in years past, you can then key on Alvin Kamara a little bit better than you otherwise would have been able to. So I guess the question is, are you surprised that the Saints haven't been letting Jameis Winston throw the ball a little bit more? Because he's capable, but they're really trying to limit the turnovers when it comes to Jameis.
Yeah, no, I'm not surprised because the Saints saw Jameis in Tampa when he threw the ball 40 times, and they saw how that went, and it didn't work. So I think they're
Mm-hmm.
really saving him from himself and putting him in a position to succeed. And when you look at the team, and kudos to Sean Payton for not just saying, I'm a coach who is an expansive offensive play caller. I want lots of points. I want to do all these elaborate things. He
Mm-hmm.
had to change as Drew Brees' arm strength went away. And I think he's changing around Jameis Winston and saying, I have someone with some arm talent, but with some questionable decisions. I'm not going to put him in a high volume of scenarios for him to make decisions because eventually he's going to make ones that are questionable. My
Yeah.
best player is Alvin Kamara. I'm going to get him the ball at all times. My best unit is my defense. I'm going to allow my defense to play well, give us good field position, and not lose games. Allow my defense to help win games until Michael Thomas gets back.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, you've got a true number one who can dictate coverage, who can win contested balls. And I think at that point, you start to open things up a little bit. But for right now, I think he's just biding time and allowing his player with talent not to do things that are going to erode at his confidence and put his team in a position not to win games.
Okay, that's a really good point bringing up Michael Thomas. Obviously, he's on the IR. Saints don't have his services yet. But do we really believe that when Michael Thomas comes back, all of a sudden the reins are going to be taken off? Or if you're stashing Michael Thomas now and people might have that expectation that when Michael Thomas comes back, he's going to eat like he ate with Drew Brees, that might not be the case. Is there an opportunity there for you to flip him if you have him on your IR, flip him to another fantasy owner that might be high on Michael Thomas and living in the past? If you can get decent enough value on something coming back, because there's still going to be a couple of weeks until Michael Thomas comes back, is there an opportunity there to sort of, and he's not playing, but sell high on what Michael Thomas' reputation is, just based on what you've seen from the Saints?
If you can afford to wait and you got him, I say wait. Because if he comes back and he's right, down the stretch, you've got, an automatic start at the receiver
Mm-hmm.
position. He's going to be, anywhere from a wide receiver 2 to the upside could be wide receiver 1 down the
Right.
stretch. If you need some production now and you're just staring at him in your IR spot, giving you no value, I would move him and look for some other owners who might be a little bit desperate at the receiver position, maybe you make an offer for a Josh Gordon, who's going to make his debut tonight. And the upside certainly might be high in that Kansas City Chiefs offense. So if you need to start to accrue some points from your receivers and you're a bit desperate and can't wait, then yeah, I'd move him for someone who people might be down on. A Chase Claypool, for example, who hasn't had the greatest start, but again, could have a strong run. I mentioned Josh Gordon, but other than that, I do think you drafted him, you've held on to him for this long, you might as well wait it out a little bit longer.
Okay, you mentioned Chase Claypool. Chase Claypool is active today for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Big Ben's going to like having his athletic receiver back in the lineup. And Joe Mixon is also officially active for the Cincinnati Bengals. This is the last question. We started with Dalvin Cook and Joe Mixon. We know now that Dalvin Cook will not be playing. Joe Mixon will be playing. I think what that says to me is the Vikings have a lot more confidence in Alexander Mattison than the Bengals have in Samaj Pirine and Chris Evans coming out of the backfield. But if you are a Joe Mixon owner, what on earth do you do? Because there is very much a re-injury risk here. Joe Mixon has done this in years past. He has tried to play through injuries, and it has become a nagging injury all throughout the season that impacts his fantasy outlook and output. So what do you do with Joe Mixon today, now knowing that he's officially active?
I think you play him. Even when he is playing, it's not going to be a timeshare with P. Ryan. It's going to be his show. So I just would hate living with the regret if he goes off for 20, 25, 30 points. He's sitting there on your bench. If he re-injures himself, you hope that it's in the fourth quarter and not the first, and you got some value from him. But assuming the projections are pretty close, and you're going to need that production from him. I think you play. Listen, the running back groups that some of the people on this stream have, maybe you could afford to not play them. It seems like everyone who asks us questions weekly have 4, 5, 6 running backs. I got a stable of running backs. Like it's the U in the early 2000s. But
that's good.
But yeah, assuming that you got him, you drafted him in the first round for a reason, I think you play him.
All right. Look, again, thanks so much for joining me. We could talk for hours, but look, I got to figure out what happened in the Jets-Falcons game. I got to get my bets ready to go. You got to get your bets ready to go. We got to set our fantasy lineups. There's only 55 minutes now until 1 o'clock, so we got to get it moving here. We appreciate the questions, as always. Thank you so much for watching. You have our handles there up on the screen, Jesse Rubinoff, Donnovan Bennett. If you have any more questions from now up until kickoff or for the later slates or for the primetime games, feel free to reach out to us on Twitter, Instagram, whatever. We will be happy to answer any and all of your questions. So again, DJ, thanks, buddy. For DJ, I'm Jesse. Thanks for watching Sportsnet Fantasy Playbook Live. We will see you next week.